The official line from the Reserve Bank of India is that the economy is safe. They point to a massive foreign exchange reserve, $700 billion, as a financial fortress capable of withstanding global shocks. But this photograph from Panipat tells a different story. These are thousands of migrant laborers lined up, waiting for buses to take them back to their villages, because the factories they rely on have suddenly stopped running. 1,000 miles away in Morbi, Gujarat, the town's entire industry relies on natural gas to fire its tile-making kilns. With gas supplies drying up and costs spiking, factory owners have been forced to shut off the ovens entirely. The root of this industrial freeze is visible in the exchange rate. A single US dollar now commands significantly more Indian rupees. Since the conflict began, the rupee has slid from 83 down to 94 against the dollar, making imported energy painfully expensive. This sudden currency crash was triggered by a specific catalyst. The escalating military conflict between Iran and Israel has thrown global energy and currency markets into a panic. The Middle East conflict acts as a direct threat to Indian stability, exposing a hidden mathematical flaw in the nation's economic armor. To understand that flaw, we have to look at the Gulf region. This area functions as the undisputed center of global energy output, pumping millions of barrels of crude oil and natural gas every single day. But this coastal infrastructure represents a massive geopolitical vulnerability. The entire Gulf region relies on exactly 57 desalination plants like this one to provide its population with drinking water. Iran has signaled that if its own power grid is attacked, it can launch missiles at these 57 water plants. Destroying them would leave nations like Saudi Arabia and Kuwait without water in a matter of days, immediately halting oil and gas exports as the region's workforce is paralyzed. If the Gulf's exports halt, the global supply drops instantly, sending the price of crude oil and natural gas skyrocketing to levels that would cripple importing nations. India remains reliant on this specific, highly vulnerable supply line for its basic energy survival. This brings us back to the Reserve Bank of India and its claim of holding a $700 billion foreign exchange reserve to fight off this exact type of global oil shock. This chart shows the composition of that reserve. A massive portion is tied up in illiquid assets, like gold and International Monetary Fund shares. These assets cannot be used to settle daily accounts for shipments of crude oil. That leaves a much smaller pool of liquid cash. To keep the rupee artificially strong at 83 to the dollar, the central bank shorted the US dollar in the forward market, placing a massive financial bet that the dollar's value would stay low. But as the rupee slid to 94 against the dollar, that short position generated massive hidden liabilities. International banks hold those contracts, creating an estimated $80 to $100 billion debt that now sits on the central bank's balance sheet. The current Reserve Bank of India leadership, including Governor Shaktikanta Das, acted as the architects of this specific forward market strategy. Once you subtract the gold, the IMF shares, and the tens of billions in hidden debts, the actual usable cash India has left to fight an energy crisis is dangerously low. The stress of that dollar deficit translates directly into losses for state-run oil companies. They are currently absorbing roughly 1,500 crore rupees in daily losses to keep consumer prices from exploding at the pump. That shockwave moves quickly into the real economy. When expensive imported natural gas becomes unavailable, the tile factories in Morbi shut down, which in turn freezes major real estate and housing development projects across the country. It travels even further. A third of the world's urea fertilizer is produced in the Gulf. A supply disruption threatens immediate food inflation. Simultaneously, broken supply chains in Dubai are halting the delivery of generic drugs to international markets. A missile threat 3,000 miles away unspools the interconnected threads of India's domestic supply chain, forcing a cascade of failures from energy prices to food security. Even if the war ended immediately, the economic damage is locked in. This satellite image shows the Ras Laffan port in Qatar, a crucial liquefied natural gas hub. Damaged terminals like these require a minimum of 6 to 12 months to repair and repressurize. The era of artificially cheap global oil, subsidizing India's economic growth for a decade, is over. To see the level of India's exposure, look at the infrastructure of its geopolitical rival. Over the last 10 years, China quietly built a strategic petroleum reserve of 1.2 billion barrels, housed in these endless rows of storage tanks. That stockpile gives China a buffer of up to 4 months to survive a blockade. India, by contrast, holds barely enough emergency oil to last 30 days. Without a massive stockpile, India relies entirely on just-in-time logistics. Its survival depends on an uninterrupted chain of ocean freighters delivering fuel when needed. True national security relies on physical strategic buffers. When financial illusions fade, headline numbers on a central bank spreadsheet offer no protection to the everyday citizens left to pay the price for this exposure.